Breaking news from the Middle East, and this time the world must listen carefully. Israel has once again crossed the line of humanity, escalating its brutal aggression in Gaza to levels never seen before. On Friday, August 29, 2025, the Israeli military officially declared Gaza City a dangerous combat zone. This chilling announcement is not only a political maneuver, it is a signal of destruction, a direct declaration of war against civilians already struggling to survive after nearly 2 years of relentless bombardments. The Israeli military spokesman, Avichai Adri, stood before cameras and proudly proclaimed that their forces were entering the so-called first phase of a large-scale offensive aimed at dismantling Hamas and recovering hostages. But let us be absolutely clear, behind this polished military language hides the cold reality of civilian suffering. Israel has decided to intensify its attacks, to unleash heavier bombardments, regardless of the fact that Gaza's streets are still filled with children, mothers, elderly, and the sick. This is not a strategy of liberation. This is collective punishment. Adding to the outrage, Israel has abruptly ended the short tactical pause that previously allowed humanitarian aid convoys to enter Gaza between 10 a.m. and 8 p.m. local time. With one stroke of decision, food, water, and medical supplies are now blocked, pushing millions of Palestinians deeper into hunger and desperation. Humanitarian organizations are already warning. Without this lifeline, Gaza is set to plunge into catastrophic suffering within days. The United Nations itself has raised alarm, stating that this new offensive could shut down half of Gaza's already crippled hospital capacity. Imagine wounded civilians with no access to doctors, children with no medicine, mothers giving birth without electricity or sterile equipment. Israel knows this, yet proceeds without hesitation. Gaza is being strangled both by bombs from above and starvation from within. This is the grim reality unfolding before our eyes. And yet, Israel insists on painting itself as a victim while turning an entire city into rubble. The world must ask, how much longer will this brutality be tolerated? As Israel intensifies its so-called military operation, the horrifying scale of destruction is becoming undeniable. Gaza City, once a place of vibrant markets, schools, and families, is now reduced to smoke, rubble, and despair. Eyewitnesses report that Israeli airstrikes have leveled entire neighborhoods within minutes, leaving survivors trapped under collapsed buildings while rescue teams scramble with bare hands, without equipment, without electricity, without fuel. This is not a war against militants. It is a war against the very existence of Palestinian life. International agencies are warning that the humanitarian crisis has reached a tipping point. The World Health Organization confirms that hospitals in northern Gaza are overwhelmed and running out of oxygen. Doctors are performing surgeries by flashlight, with no anesthesia, as bombings thunder outside. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency, UNRWA, reports that over 1 million people are now internally displaced, crammed into overcrowded shelters that lack even the most basic necessities: clean water, food, and sanitation. Diseases are spreading, yet Israel shows no sign of restraint. What makes this tragedy even more unbearable is Israel's deliberate targeting of civilian infrastructure. Water pipelines, power stations, bakeries, and even schools designated as UN shelters have all been struck. These are not accidental, collateral damages, as Tel Aviv's officials claim. These are systematic strikes meant to suffocate a population into submission. The language of counterterrorism cannot hide the truth of collective punishment inflicted on 2 million souls. And yet, while these crimes unfold, much of the Western world remains complicit. Statements from Washington and European capitals repeat the same empty lines about Israel's right to defend itself. But where are the statements about the rights of Palestinian children to live, to drink clean water, to go to school without fear of being buried alive under rubble? The silence is deafening, and the hypocrisy is staggering. The streets of Gaza now echo with cries of grief. Families clutch lifeless bodies wrapped in white shrouds, as morgues overflow and cemeteries run out of space. The people ask, how many more must die before the world acts? The brutality of Israel's campaign is not only measured in bombs dropped, but in the calculated strangulation of Gaza's lifelines. Reports confirm that Israel has imposed a total blockade, cutting off fuel, electricity, medicine, and even food from entering the strip. This is not defense. It is starvation used as a weapon of war. Families are now boiling dirty water, parents skipping meals so their children can eat a single piece of bread, and hospitals forced to run on failing generators that could shut down at any moment. Such measures violate every principle of international humanitarian law, yet they continue with impunity. Journalists on the ground describe the scenes as apocalyptic. Entire districts are without power, engulfed in darkness each night as Israeli jets roar overhead. The sound of drones never stops, creating an environment of constant terror. Children cry themselves to sleep, if they sleep at all, while parents whisper prayers they may not survive until morning. Schools that once echoed with lessons are now silent, their classrooms reduced to rubble or turned into makeshift morgues. Israel claims these actions are necessary to dismantle Hamas. But let us be clear. Starving children, bombing hospitals, and displacing over 1 million civilians has nothing to do with military objectives. These are acts of collective punishment, a war crime in the eyes of international law. And yet, global powers hesitate to use that word. Instead, we hear calls for restraint and humanitarian pauses, meaningless phrases that do nothing to stop the bloodshed. Meanwhile, in capitals across the world, protests are swelling. From London to Jakarta, from New York to Cape Town, millions are flooding the streets, demanding justice for Palestine. Ordinary citizens are voicing what governments refuse to say. Israel is committing crimes against humanity, and silence makes us complicit. The gap between the outrage of people and the cowardice of leaders has never been clearer. In Gaza, the night remains heavy with fear. The siege tightens, the bombs fall, but the will of the people endures. For every building destroyed, voices rise louder demanding freedom, dignity, and the right to live. The destruction unfolding in Gaza is not random collateral damage. It is deliberate. Israel's airstrikes are systematically erasing neighborhoods, flattening apartment complexes, and leaving families buried under the rubble. Rescue workers, often with bare hands, scramble to dig survivors out while bombs continue to fall nearby. The world has seen the haunting images: a father clutching the lifeless body of his child, a mother screaming in disbelief as her home is turned to dust, children wandering the streets covered in ash and blood, searching for parents who may never return. These are not militant strongholds, as Israel claims. They are people's homes, schools, and hospitals. Hospitals, in particular, have become symbolic battlegrounds. Israel insists that militants hide beneath medical facilities, yet offers no credible evidence while unleashing firepower on them. Doctors, already working without sleep, now operate by flashlight, stitching wounds with limited supplies, begging for anesthesia that never arrives. Ambulances are targeted, medics killed, and newborns lie in incubators powered by generators that could fail at any moment. To bomb hospitals is not an accident. It is a message of terror, designed to crush the very heart of civilian life. And yet, Israel continues to cloak itself in the rhetoric of self-defense. But how can starving civilians, bombed hospitals, and slaughtered children be described as defense? This is aggression in its most ruthless form, a war waged not against militants but against an entire population trapped in a cage with no escape. The blockade ensures there is nowhere to flee, making Gaza a death trap. What amplifies the outrage is the deafening silence, or worse, the open support, from Western powers. Billions of dollars in weapons flow to Israel, financing the very bombs that obliterate Gaza's children. Leaders who preach democracy and human rights turn their backs, hiding behind political calculations. The hypocrisy is staggering. When others commit such crimes, the world is quick to impose sanctions. But when Israel does it, the world looks away. Despite this, the resilience of the Palestinian people remains unshaken. Amid the rubble, they chant for freedom. Amid the bloodshed, they cling to hope. Their voices, though drowned in the roar of jets, are carried across the globe as millions march demanding an end to Israel's impunity. The images emerging from Gaza cannot be denied. Entire families are being erased from the civil registry in a single strike. Generations wiped out in seconds. Grandparents, parents, and children, all reduced to statistics in a war that Israel disguises as precision. But these are not surgical strikes. They are acts of collective punishment. Precision does not leave dozens of children buried under concrete. Precision does not destroy schools filled with displaced families. Precision does not target journalists whose only weapon is a camera. This is not defense, it is slaughter. Journalists on the ground, risking their lives to report, have become targets themselves. Cameras smashed, press vests pierced by bullets, and news offices bombed into ashes. Israel fears not only Palestinian resistance but also the truth. Silencing the media ensures the crimes remain hidden, but even in darkness, the world sees. Social media has turned every citizen with a phone into a witness, and their testimonies are undeniable. The cries of children, the desperate pleas of doctors, the funerals that stretch endlessly, all captured and broadcast for the world to see. Yet, despite the mountain of evidence, Israel dares to call these victims human shields. It is a grotesque narrative, blaming the oppressed for their own deaths. The reality is clear. Gaza is under siege, surrounded by walls, patrolled by drones, strangled by blockade. Where can civilians hide? There are no bomb shelters, no escape routes, no safe zones. The very concept of evacuation orders is a cruel joke, pushing families from one rubble-strewn street to another, only to be bombed again. International outrage grows, yet global institutions remain paralyzed. The United Nations debates resolutions that are vetoed before the ink dries. Western leaders wring their hands while shipping more weapons. The so-called international community exposes itself as complicit in genocide by its inaction. How many more children must be carried in white shrouds before the world finds its voice? Through the smoke and blood, the people of Gaza continue to stand. Their resilience, their refusal to bow, is a direct challenge to the machinery of occupation. Every act of survival is resistance. Every life saved from the rubble is defiance. And with every bomb dropped, Israel loses not only its humanity but its moral legitimacy before the eyes of the world. The brutality unfolding in Gaza has now reached the level of open defiance against the very foundations of international law. Israel acts as though it is untouchable, shielded by the silence of its allies and the paralysis of global institutions. The Geneva Conventions, once considered sacred, are trampled under the boots of occupation. Hospitals are not spared. United Nations shelters, where families huddle believing in the promise of protection, are struck repeatedly. Even ambulances, carrying the wounded, become moving targets. What kind of defense is this, when it is the most vulnerable who are consistently in the crosshairs? Doctors speak of impossible choices, operating without anesthesia, amputating limbs without painkillers, and treating dozens of wounded on cold floors because beds have run out. Water is scarce, food is dwindling, and electricity is a memory. Israel's blockade has transformed Gaza into an open-air prison, and now that prison is being bombed day and night. The people are not only under attack from the air but also strangled on the ground. Starvation and thirst are being used as weapons of war. This is not collateral damage, it is a strategy of annihilation. Meanwhile, Israeli leaders stand before cameras and proclaim their right to defend themselves. They demand sympathy while erasing entire neighborhoods, while Palestinian children are buried nameless in mass graves. The hypocrisy is staggering. The international press is fed carefully crafted narratives, but no amount of propaganda can mask the images streaming out from Gaza, the images of lifeless infants wrapped in white cloth, mothers screaming in despair, fathers carrying the remains of their children in plastic bags. And yet, despite the rivers of blood, the resistance endures. The Palestinian people, stripped of everything, still hold on to their dignity. They cling to their homeland with a determination that cannot be bombed away. Each strike intended to break them only hardens their resolve. Every funeral fuels their will to survive. Israel, in its relentless pursuit of dominance, has underestimated the power of a people who refuse to vanish. The world stands at a crossroads. To remain silent is to endorse this bloodshed. To look away is to become complicit. The question is no longer whether Israel is committing atrocities, it is how long the world will allow it to continue. The atrocities in Gaza have reached a scale that can no longer be hidden behind political excuses or diplomatic silence. Israel is not only waging a war, it is conducting a systematic campaign of destruction against an entire population. Schools are in ruins, mosques reduced to ashes, and markets turned into charred wastelands. What was once a city alive with families, children playing, and shopkeepers opening their stalls each morning is now nothing more than rubble, smoke, and the echo of grief. Every strike is calculated, every target chosen with the knowledge that civilians will pay the heaviest price. This is not a mistake. It is a method. Israel has perfected the politics of fear, using overwhelming force to break the spirit of a people already living under siege. But Gaza refuses to surrender. Despite the bombs, the people remain unbroken, holding on to their land and their identity with a courage that defies the brutality imposed upon them. On the international stage, however, hypocrisy reigns supreme. Western powers lecture the world about human rights while turning a blind eye to Gaza's agony. They supply weapons, provide political cover, and echo talking points that strip Palestinians of their humanity. These same nations that once cried out, "Never again," now watch silently as genocide unfolds before their very eyes. History will not forgive this complicity. The blood of Gaza stains not only the hands of Israel but also those who empower it. The Israeli government speaks of security, yet their actions reveal their true intent: to erase, to silence, to dominate. Gaza is not merely a battlefield, it is the last frontier of Palestinian existence, and Israel seeks to erase it from the map. But no amount of bombs can erase the memory of a people, nor can it extinguish their right to live freely on their own land. This is no longer just a Palestinian struggle. It is a global moral test. Will humanity rise to defend the defenseless, or will we allow fear, politics, and double standards to bury justice beneath the rubble of Gaza? The choice lies not only in the hands of governments but in the conscience of every individual who dares to see the truth. As we reach the end of this report, the truth cannot be ignored. Gaza has become the front line of humanity's conscience. Israel's relentless campaign of destruction is not only a crime against the Palestinian people, it is a crime against the principles of justice, dignity, and humanity itself. Every bomb that falls on Gaza is an attack not only on its people but on the values we claim to uphold as a global community. The world now stands at a crossroads. Will we allow Israel's war machine, fueled by silence and supported by hypocrisy, to continue unchecked? Or will the voices of ordinary people rise above political games to demand accountability, justice, and an end to the bloodshed? This is no longer about borders or politics. It is about humanity's collective responsibility to stop genocide before it writes another shameful chapter in history. To the people of Gaza, your resilience is a testament to the unbreakable human spirit. Despite the bombs, the hunger, and the endless nights of terror, you continue to stand, to live, to hope. And that hope, fragile yet unyielding, is the most powerful weapon against the cruelty of those who seek to erase you. But hope must be matched with action. The international community must stop hiding behind empty words and symbolic gestures. Sanctions, investigations, accountability, these are not optional, they are moral imperatives. No leader, no government, no institution can claim neutrality when innocent lives are at stake. To remain silent is to be complicit. History will remember. It will remember the cries of Gaza's children, the courage of its people, and the betrayal of those who looked away. But history will also remember those who chose to speak out, to act, to stand on the side of justice when silence was the easier path. This is not just the story of Gaza, it is the story of our world, our values, and our humanity. And the question remains, when the dust settles and the smoke clears, where will you stand? With the oppressor, or with the oppressed? With destruction, or with justice? The answer will define not only Gaza's future, but our own.